All right, peace and blessings. It's Thursday, March the 8th, the year 2018. David Hinkson has taken the time to write a letter to John B. Wells. He wrote it in 3 parts. It's fairly long. The first part was completely lost, and so David Hinkson had to rewrite it, and because he took the time to write it, we're going to read it, and I pray that it will get to John B. Wells, and I, for one, happen to think that it would be a blockbuster jailhouse interview to have John B. Wells interview David Hinkson from prison, who's been unjustly incarcerated for 15 years. If you guys think that as well, I hope you reach out to caravantomidnight.com and let John B. Wells know that you would be interested in seeing that happen. I know that we could facilitate David calling John B. Wells for an interview, and I think those two would make a blockbuster jailhouse interview. But with no further ado, I'm going to read David Hinkson's letter to John B. Wells into YouTube, and we'll also put this on David Hinkson's page on yearofjubilee.com. Like I said, it's fairly long. John Wells, Part 1A. Dear John, I have followed your public speaking career over the years, and when I got to the Atwater prison, I was very happy to see that they had compiled many CDs that were narrated by you. I especially like the one where you talked about evolution, as this was the best video that I have ever seen on this subject. As a former talk show host myself, who has done over 1,200 consecutive talk shows in the past on the WWCR Worldwide Christian Radio Network, I can tell you that you, in my opinion, had the best and most sincere voice, and in my opinion, you really know your subject matter. My show started right after the Bill Cooper show, as he was released. My show started right after the Bill Cooper show, as he released the satellite feed to me every evening, 5 days a week. I had Bill on my show many times, and he had me on his show many times, and we became close friends. The format for the David Hinkson show, in my opinion, sounded a little bit like the Coast to Coast when Art was running. I would interview people and let them express their opinion, and then I would give commentary. I guess you could say that my show was on the cutting edge of its time. For example, I was the first person to interview John D. Camp, Griffin, Creature from Jekyll Island, Bill Benson, Law That Never Was. In fact, I even interviewed a Federal Reserve auditor and Mr. Smith and Rick from Right Way Law. In fact, many of the guests that I heard on Coast to Coast were also on my show during this Art Bell period of time. My friend, the late Bob Sandberg, emailed me in prison to tell me how George Norrie had wrongfully fired you, and I was very upset about this. Bob died a few weeks ago and was a nuclear scientist. It is my opinion, from what I heard and understand, that Mr. Norrie stole the Coast to Coast show from Art Bell, but this is just my understanding and belief at this time. I also think that Mr. Norrie is making sure that the Coast to Coast show got and remains sanitized with disinformation, and this is why I no longer listen to it. I was really excited to turn on the radio when you first went on the Coast to Coast and hear your voice, so I would stay up most of the night listening to you. I was very disappointed when you were removed from this talk show, as I felt I had lost my link to the world. Even now, I have no way of hearing your voice in Kentucky. Bob died a few weeks ago, and as a doctor and nuclear scientist and my best friend, I can honestly say that Bob knew more about physics than anyone on this planet. And he was very spiritual Christian also. It saddens me that he was never interviewed by you to be on your show, as you would have really had a great interview. Here is just a little bit about my story and how I got involved in teaching Christian concepts, my background. I was born on July the 18th, 1956, and many years later, I noticed that I was born about 100 years to the day and minute after Nikola Tesla was born. I don't know what this means, but I thought it was a little bit odd. I was only 5 years old when I wound my first Tesla coil. By the time I was 10, I was fixing and racing my own motorcycles, and even had a dune buggy, and even had a laboratory with a microscope. I even mastered the art of welding. I was raised LDS and really never had much interest in it, as I ended up not even going on a mission as I joined the Navy when I was 17 years old. I have figured out over the years that everything that I studied and or learned about seems to have been some kind of unholy agenda attached to it. Fascism. That really subverts truth, and it is usually right out in the open, but many can't see it even when it is right in front of them. The sad thing is that the most of the world seems to look up to this country, and that is a big mistake. When I was growing up in Long Beach, California, my parents had me live in the garage so they could have 6 mentally ill women live in our home under a program called Board and Care. I think at that time this allowed my mother to financially be able to stay at home with her children, and this was good. And I was able to sleep with my motorcycle next to my bed. In 1970, when I was 14 years old and in the 9th grade, my father moved our whole family to Ouray, Colorado, population 800. Ouray, Ouray, is called the Switzerland of America, and I think it is the most beautiful place on the continent of America. I was a newcomer there. As the students all started in kindergarten together and would stay together all the way up until they were seniors, 12th grade. At that time, I was now in the 9th grade, and the Ouray school only had a total of 115 members total, including the staff. Ouray at that time was filled with the families of miners that made it a roughneck mining town. I was not accepted as the newcomer by the 6 students. I was not accepted as the newcomer by the 6 students that were in my class. So on my 17th birthday, I signed up to go into the U.S. Navy, but they told me I first had to take my GED and some naval aptitude test. My mother said I could join the Navy, but she said this only as she knew that I would never be able to pass the GED. She was surprised when I got a very high score. I took the naval aptitude test for physics and electronics, and I scored in the upper 98 percentile range in the whole nation. And they gave me a guaranteed job rating as a jet mechanic. I ended up being stationed in Norfolk, Virginia in the HSL-30 Helicopter Sea-Land Patrol Anti-Submarine Warfare Squadron, and I then was flying missions as a plane captain looking for Russian submarines over the Bermuda Triangle. So during this period of time, I further studied the magnetic fields that are used in anti-submarine warfare. I really never cared much for being in the service, and when the war in Vietnam ended, they asked if anyone wanted to get out early, and as they were downsizing, so I was discharged honorably. I studied very hard using my GI benefits and took some tests and ended up directly becoming a real estate broker, stockbroker, and an insurance broker. Then, as the bottom had fallen out of the real estate at that time, my brothers and I renting a Texaco gas station in Ouray with a wrecker, and I worked as the only mechanic for a couple of years. It seemed that I could fix almost anything. While running this gas station, I built a General Lee car for my brother Gary Michael. So in 1982, my little brother Gary died in a car accident. I guess it really was not much of an accident, as he had been drinking and there was a full moon overhead. And the Highway Patrol estimated that he had been traveling in excess of 190 miles per hour. I guess I'm very capable of building a good race car. What it needed was more spoilers to hold it down on the curves. My friend, the late Dr. Paul Farber, who wrote a book called The Micro Silver Bullet, gave my brother's eulogy. I then purchased a home in Montrose, Colorado, and my wife Marie and I turned our home into a board and care home like the one I grew up in. But this time we took care of young men and women. A few years later, I sold this home and we moved to Las Vegas, Nevada. Then again, we opened a board and care home, and at this time, they placed a man in our home named Charles Crum. I had no idea at the time that he was a retired law professor. I then met a man named George Mitzel, M-I-T-Z-E-L. Mr. Mitzel became my partner in 3 laundry businesses in Las Vegas. This is where I finally got involved with the Sagebrush Rebellion No. 2. In summary here, Mr. Mitzel owned over 1,200 gas stations up and down the West Coast during the 40s, and he also owned an oil refinery. He later sold these stations, and they became Exxon stations. George then bought some land on the Las Vegas Strip and built his own casino called the Sans Souci, Suisse. After 10 years of running this casino, he sold it to Howard Hughes, who promptly changed the name of it to the Castaways. After he sold his casino, he met a man named Daniel Capelia, Capalia, who was a relative of the Yates family. Mr. Capelia sold Mr. Mitz the Valley Wells Ranch. The Valley Wells Ranch was owned since it was claimed in 1780 by the Yates family. The Valley Wells Ranch was over 750,000 acres of land and was only 40 miles from Las Vegas, on the California side of the border. The Valley Wells Ranch had water, fertile soil, and everything else needed to be a good farmland or a cattle ranch, as that is what it was. Then, when Jimmy Carter became president, the Congress passed a new law called the FLIPMA, F-L-I-P-M-A, Federal Land Policy Management Act. And using this law, the BLM officials stole the whole ranch from Mr. Mitzel. I think what they did is just into the courthouse and used acetone swabs to erase the microfiche, and this canceled his ownership. In other words, it was a fraud. So you can see the Mitzel Valley Well story is when I got started really learning about pre-Civil War law. Note that the common law that each republic state was venued in is based on the teachings of Jesus Christ, and all law that is created under this concept is referred to as statutes at large, not statutes. At this time, I had received a letter of credit for the China. At this time, I had received a letter of credit for the China on a deal I was working on, and I attempted to deliver $30 million worth of fertilizer to China. And as I was having some problems delivering this fertilizer, I ended up meeting and becoming best of friends with the late George Griszotti. George was a good Christian man, and I say this before I tell you that he was best known at the time as being the real mob attorney. And in fact, he represented Spilotro, C-Movie Casino. George and I became partners in attempting to finish this deal for the fertilizer. Note that George Grizzotti's father was Al Capone's enforcer, and George used to go to Sunday dinner at Al's home. George actually knew Al Capone and had the real hand painting of him hanging on his wall in his office. In fact, George had graduated with a law degree in Chicago and traveled to Las Vegas during the period of time when the Stardust was having problems with the FBI. I never got paid a dime from George, as I started working on some of his other pro bono projects. So now I had George Griszotti and Charles Crum both helping me to understand the current law and the pre-Civil War law. This is when it got interesting, as Charles and I went to the UNLV, University of Las Vegas Archives, and read all of the pre-Civil War land law cases going back all the way to founding of what used to be the United States of America, 1776. This is when I learned that all of the ownership and concepts of land ownership were changed by Abraham Lincoln after the Civil War. Therefore, in my opinion, I am now the foremost expert in this country on pre-Civil War law concepts. I assure you that the pre-Civil War legal concepts were all based on Christianity and were all canceled totally by Abe Lincoln. I guess you can say I'm not a fan of Abe's. It is my opinion at this time that it is the very concept of canceling the pre-Civil War common law principles and converting the new federal government into a privately owned corporate body that is, in my opinion, owned by the royal family of England to create the new world order. In fact, this is exactly what Adolf did in Germany, and as he canceled the Republic of Germany and converted his country into a corporation. Before the Civil War, citizens of the Republic states were venued in common law, and each state was sovereign to all of the unappropriated lands within. Lands were named public after the Civil War. All a citizen claimant had to do was file a deed poll, whereas a person deeded the land to himself in the name of Jesus Christ as the grantor. Now, even today, this is the proper and legal way that a citizen should claim property. Note that nowhere in the Constitution for the United States of America did it give the right to the new so-called federal government to keep or remain owner of any lands after the grant of statehood. They are now legally estoppeled from owning any of these so-called public lands, even after being granted them by a new state pursuant to the separation of powers as found in the 10th Amendment and the right of equal footing. Yes, both Charles and George helped me write the briefs that now 100% prove that the federal government did and does not own these lands, and they now refer to as public lands. So I now find myself doing the legal briefs in an attempt to get back the Valley Wells Ranch, and I worked on over 50 other cases. For example, I did the legal briefs for Bobby Baracini, who had a show at the Lido Stardust, had the orangutans, see movie Any Which Way But Loose, right turn, Clyde. So during this period of time, while working with George, I met one of his clients named the late Douglas Noland. Okay, that's the end of part 1A. Like I said, it's a long letter. I'm going to go to part 1B now. My background. I was born in July 18th, 1956, and many years later I noticed that I was born about 100 years to the day and minute after Nikola Tesla was born. Wow, you know what? I think I've read that. I'm going to go on to part C. Yeah, okay, I think we got part 1 finally. Let me go to John Wells part 2. Keep in mind, he's communicating from prison, and the prison won't let him send the whole letter, so I have to find the parts and put them all together. That's why it's a little bit challenging, but I did find part 2. The last Douglas Noland was Navajo, and he grew up in Arizona. Note that the BLM let us win by just dropping out of the legal argument and bringing coffee and donuts to meet with the people they were harassing with the phony legal process. After we won our legal argument against the BLM, while I was over at Doug's home, he tossed me what looked like a big lead button. I said, "Where did you get this lead?" He then said, "Boy, that isn't lead. Rub it on the paper." I rubbed it on a white piece of paper on his table, and it left no mark. He said, "This platinum came off the claims that you just saved." He went on to tell me that the assay had showed that there was around 3,000 ounces of platinum on most of the entire 2,000 acres of claims. This is truly the motherlode of platinum. There is in fact platinum out there on these claims to debunk the global price of platinum and back the worthless U.S. fiat money supply. Maybe this would slow down the New World Order. During one of my talk shows on the WWCR, Worldwide Christian Radio Network, I had interviewed a man named David Hudson, who claimed that his leach mining operation had collected some very strange white powder that was really monoatomic gold. I had Doug listen to the recording of the radio interview, and he said, "Look in here," and he took the lid off of a 55-gallon barrel that was full of this white gold. He told me that he thought it was gold as it had acted like gold and had gummed up his leach mining filters. He also told me that he was able to make regular gold into this white powder, but he never been able to turn this white powder into anything that looked like a metal. So he then spent the next 6 months working full-time on this project. I helped when I could, and I think he did over 200 different tests. Finally, he figured out how to turn this monoatomic white gold into real yellow gold. Then I realized that lava on the Hawaiian Islands test as having no gold in it at all, yet I know that gold is very heavy, and using logic you would think that there would be a lot of gold in lava. After doing an assay test and processing the white monoatomic gold powder from some lava samples, we determined that the overage amount of gold in lava in the form of this white powder was about 3,000 ounces per square yard. I find it very interesting that this is the same amount of regular platinum that he had found on his platinum mining claims. In Hudson's lecture, he made a lot of interesting comments about this monoatomic gold. He said, for instance, that if you consumed it, you would get wiser, and he further called it the philosopher's stone. He claimed it surrounded the mummy on the floor in the Egyptian tombs and was swept up as worthless dust. I later found out that Johnson and Mathey always lost about 2% of the gold they processed, and they throw this white dust away. I have now personally taken real yellow gold and converted into this white powder. And I have also helped Doug turn this white powder gold back into real yellow gold. This probably means that I'm now the only man alive that knows how to do this process, and who also where these mining claims are located out in the Nevada desert. So I called up my lawyer friend named Scott Cantor from prison about 6 months ago. Scott was Grisotti's junior partner at the law firm of Grisotti and Cantor, and I asked Scott Cantor if he remembered Doug and the platinum claims. He said yes, I've held bars of this platinum, but I don't know where these claims are located. Scott has agreed to verify that Mr. Noland really had these claims. Back in 1993, as I was doing my talk show, I eventually invented the Galt motor and the STIWAD, S-T-I-W-A-D, static time interval warp drive, and the electric jet engine. I got the Galt motor to actually spin a shaft, and I got the STIWAD to actually levitate. See johnsearle.com. John, JOHNSEARL.com. George Mitzel passed away, and before he died, he had deeded me most of the Valley Wells Ranch. We never did get it back. I finally gave up and moved to Water Oz factory. I finally gave up and moved my Water Oz factory to Idaho and left the Las Vegas area. George Grisotti also passed away. About Water Oz. I started Water Oz for the sole purpose of being able to pay for my airtime so that I could do my talk show, as it cost about $10,000 per month just to be on worldwide Christian radio. In the beginning, I tried to make the minerals in the same way that the others were making them, using electricity. And then I learned that using electricity makes the mineral into a toxic heavy metal brew. Therefore, I now would speak against any mineral that is made this way. Note that some radio shows like Alex Jones are now promoting silver water that is made using electricity, and this is heavy metals and is called colloidal silver. I went on to pioneer a new way of reducing these minerals in such a way to make them clear and pre-digested, and there were no nitrates in any of them. I learned that nitrate levels in minerals make them toxic. See Aaron Brockovich. I would now like to be able to help you fund your show and airtime with mineral products that really work. I learned many things. For example, silver stains and does not cross the blood-brain barrier, and is best used to be inhaled with a nebulizer to remove T.C. TC, I don't know what TC is. Or a person should only use it cosmetically. Silver does not kill any parasites, only viruses. I also learned that copper could be made into a non-toxic drink, and this copper product could cross the brain and spinal fluid barriers, as it can travel everywhere throughout the entire body system where moisture is found. Now, if enough copper is consumed, 8 ounces at 300 parts per million, a person can find that TB, tuberculosis, hepatitis C, AIDS, malaria, river blindness, and even the brain-eating amoeba will be removed fast. Note, there is currently no treatment for the brain-eating amoeba. In fact, copper not only kills every virus known to man, but it also kills every parasite known to man also. Then I learned that the copper water fixes the liver's ability to digest proteins. One woman who drank some of the copper that had sickle cell lost the condition. Scott Cantor was diagnosed with lymphoma, and it disappeared after consuming the copper product. It is my opinion that right now, that consuming a non-toxic copper solution will take care of more health problems than anything else that I have ever heard about. Yet, if copper is made wrong, it is a total poison. I have now consumed over 1 gallon of copper water at 300 parts per million over a 3-day time period of time, with no negative effects. We also did some testing on indium. Indium seems to balance the pituitary gland, and as everything in the body is controlled by hormones, the indium seems to put everything back into balance. For example, if you consume 2 ounces of indium at 100 parts per million, you will feel happiness overtake you to the point where you might think you have just finished drinking a glass of red wine. One overweight lady who started consuming the indium found that she could go for 5 days and not eat any food. and at the same time not be hungry or dizzy as she just burned off her fat. This made losing weight super easy, so I know that if we could send out free samples of this Indian product and they consume it, they will demand more instantly. I also manufactured thousands of low-cost ozone machines. I made the only ozone machine that would do both water and air. And I discovered if you ozonated your drinking water, it would become a super antioxidant. I learned that zinc made correctly could be consumed at high levels and would stop all pathogens from replicating. Calcium made correctly, not as a calcium carbonate, can actually absorb the acidic crystalline neurotoxins that actually cause flu symptoms. So in summary here, I was able to remove the common cold and even the symptoms in about 2 hours using my minerals. So in 2000, after I graduated and got a degree in neuropath, I traveled overseas and worked with some doctors who were working for the Doctors Without Borders, and we did some clinical studies. My last lecture was given in Kharkov, Ukraine in November of 2002. I was arrested when I got off the plane and then spent the next 2 years in the Boise jail. While in this jail, the rat Swisher, Elvin Joe Swisher, sued me and tried to seize my Water Oz business and then lost this lawsuit. He then came to court and said I was hiring him to be a hitman because he was Rambo and he had murdered for his country. Note, he used the word murder for real. I was then given a 43-year sentence for hiring this man to be a hitman to kill Judge Lodge. Lodge is the judge that did Ruby Ridge and had a Congressman Hinkson diesel therapy. I went on trial in Boise, Idaho. I'm not from Boise and I never even knew who Judge Lodge was. Note that there is no evidence in my case, period, except my honest word against his lies. I was given a sentence of death by time to stop me from continuing my work. One of the jurors was Judge Lodge's wife's brother. That's an incredible statement. One of the jurors was Judge Lodge's wife's brother. And one of the juror, Claudia Haynes, was the Lodge's wife's campaign manager when she ran for the state senate. I have now been a political prisoner for 16 years. Every time I file a motion, they wrongfully rule against me and the Constitution. They are now, in my opinion, godless demigods. Richard Talman. Now, I have finished drafting many pictures of my 7 energy devices. I have been able to actually get the real Galt motor actually working on the bench. So now go to YouTube and type in Galt generator, and the 4th pick down is our newest drawing. Note, you can also search for I energy supply. Note, it shows that we are violating the law of Lenz. Note that the Galt is actually an AC magneto that has been merged into the transformer to make a whole new electrical concept. We also have the H transformer now working on the bench also. My mission statement is to help people lower the cost of their energy bills by 50% and maybe help them co-generate AC energy to actually feed the grid. Therefore, of the listeners who donate a small amount to our crowdfunding website can get a voucher that will promise them a free Hinkson coil to be installed at the property of their choice, and anyone who gets a Hinkson transformer will further qualify to have their real property no longer pay any property taxes for 10 years. See the usgreencouncil.com. I want to help fund political prisoners' defense and pay for an organization to lobby for the wrongfully incarcerated. I want to help fund your talk show ongoing from these monthly amounts collected from your listeners. I had the idea of having a talk show promote a small crowdfunding project to get started, and then we would use the money to build some of my energy devices. Then I want to take these funded energy devices and place them for free with the people who donated the small amount for us to get started. In doing business this way, each customer listener would get a free Hinkson transformer installed at the property of their choice, and they would be able to drop their monthly power bill by at least 50%, and we will be able to collect monthly energy money from each of them, as their properties will now all qualify for a platinum certificate. See usgreencouncil.com/org. We will then use this monthly money to expand by placing millions of these energy devices all over the country using cogeneration contracts, as we then we'll be able to seize the global warming movement and agenda and turn it into a new mission for God and good. We need to now be able to gather up energy funds while helping people lower their overall power cost by at least 50%, and we can use these funds to expand our operations rapidly. I also would like to offer free samples of the copper water to all of your listeners so they can test the product out for themselves, as every person should have some of this product in storage for when the next flu season starts. Once the person has the copper water in storage, they no longer need to get vaccinated for the flu. I don't trust the medical profession with these vaccinations and inoculations. We can also offer free samples of other products that are very interesting, like the indium number 49 on the periodic table. Then, once the customer base places orders for these products, we are willing to give a permanent percentage to your show under advertising. But in all reality, we don't need to advertise, as this is not necessary. I used to have people on my show that would talk about what the product did for them, and that was enough to get the next round of free samples sent out. I would also like to offer these mineral products and the crowdfunding project to some of the other radio hosts that are doing a good show. Overall, I have 19 minerals to talk about, and each one of them has a different story. I overall want to help everybody that I can. I'm now motivated by only wanting to help others. Blessings to you, and we're going to go on to part 3. Let me try to find part 3. Hold on. Okay, John Wells, part 3. So, as you can see, I have a lot of ideas. I would love to go over more of these ideas with you over the phone or email. If I ever get out, I would also love to be on your show. In summary, I want to help you in any way I can with your mission of good works and talk. I hope that we can work together in the future to help mankind. Your friend, Dave. God bless. For anybody who stuck with me through this long, you need to watch a video called Cesspool of Corruption on the channel Fisher of Men, the David Hinkson story. There's also a piece that Fox News did on Elvin Joe Swisher. So you can search for Elvin Joe Swisher, Fox News. Megyn Kelly calls out the liar on a national basis of Elvin Joe Swisher. And keep in mind, the only reason that David Hinkson has sat in prison for 15 years on a 43-year sentence is because of the liar, Elvin Joe Swisher. And not only that, but there was a juror member who swore an affidavit that said if he had known Elvin Joe Swisher had put forth a fake DD-214, had wore a fake Purple Heart, and had never set a foot in Korea, that he would have never voted guilty. So I pray John B. Wells hears this message, and I pray he does a live interview with David Hinkson, who spent 16 now, who has spent 16 years in prison as an innocent man. Please keep David Hinkson in your prayers, and you can write a letter to David Hinkson. His mailing address is at yearofjubilee.com, Jubile. Thank you for your time.